everyone's doing really well. Decided to come down and visit the in-laws this long weekend. Had intentions of going to Walpole and dropping some baits, but the weather's just been a bit too rough and there's been a lot of rain, so had to scratch that idea. But I've been thinking about making this video for a little while now. Yeah, the reality of drone fishing, I guess, is probably what I'm going to title this video. And I've noticed a lot of people lately on social media have been getting a little frustrated with not catching fish. And I think the misconception is that, you know, people think they can just go get a drone, drop baits offshore and catch fish every time they go, and it's not the reality, unfortunately. As much as I wish it wasn't like that, it's just the way it is. Yeah, it's I guess it's the same as casting, you know. You got to look for your spots, you got to pick the right times, you got to, depending on the species you're chasing, you know, there's different moon phases, there's different tides, there's different times of the year, you know, when you're going to get target species. But yeah, it's not just a simple case of dropping your baits, you know, up to half a K off the beach and getting fish every time. And I know it's frustrating, but you know, it's not all just about catching fish, you know. But yeah, look, I figured I'd just address a couple of points. I've had, you know, maybe at least half a dozen, maybe even more people asking me about where to fish, what to look for, where I'm fishing, and yeah, it's one of those things, you know, like I'm not sure a lot of people. Alright, so put it this way. I had a message from someone saying, hey mate, I see you've been catching a few snapper lately. I've been trying for a couple months now and I haven't caught nothing. Can you tell me where to go? And before I got my first pinky, it was 2 years, man. 2 years of fishing stormy weather, cold nights, remote locations, local locations. 2 years of non-stop chasing snapper before I finally got one. So it's just a case of putting in the time, looking at, you know, keeping a diary, keeping a journal, keeping a record of, you know, tides, moon phases, time of year, weather, wind, all that sort of stuff. Keeping a record of that, you'll start to see trends, and when you see trends, then you can predict, you know, what's coming up, when and where to go. But yeah, like, I guess another thing that I want to consider talking about, another thing I want to talk about is the safety aspect of drone fishing. They're quite a dangerous device, you know. There comes a bit of responsibility when using one of these things. It's not just a simple case of flying, you know, this thing around, especially when it loses control or you have issues with it, or it, you know, starts to do some crazy things. If you're not competent, if you haven't had a bit of practice, and you're not familiar with your drone, you can hurt someone, or you can hurt yourself. You can hurt your fishing gear. So it really does pay to practice, put in the time and get familiar with your drone and learn the ropes before you go even considering tying a line to it and dropping a bait out. The last thing we need is for the authorities to crack down on drone fishermen, because there's people out there that are just, you know the old saying, you got to learn to walk before you can run. And I guess the same sort of principle applies for drone fishing. You need to really learn the ropes and understand the controls, the limitations of your drone before you just go out there and start bombing baits and terrorizing, you know, our local beaches. So practice, get familiar with everything with your drone. I guess also on the topic of drones, I've seen a lot of people on the drone fishing pages on Facebook asking what's the best drone, and I guess it's one of those things where everybody has their own opinion. You know, it's like asking what's the best rod, what's the best reel. you have a shorter rod and it saves your back, but you don't have the clearance to get over breakers and whatnot, even though you can go and put it up in a dune. But if you're not fishing in a location where there's a steep dune that you can put your rod in, then I guess a longer rod is going to be more beneficial at the compromise of, you know, putting a bit more strain on your lower back and whatnot. So it's one of those things. Everything comes as a compromise. And the same with the drones. You know, these DJI Mavics and Phantoms and whatnot, they're not actually designed for drone fishing, even though they do the job fantastic. They're not actually designed for it. So I see there's a few, well, I guess the drone specific for drone fishing, you know, have a few, not flaws, but you know, a lot of them don't even have a camera, and it's not important. I guess it's one of those things. If you want to have a camera, then yeah, you'd look for something with one. If you're not concerned about a camera, then you know, but I like to have that peace of mind that I can see my bait disconnected, or I can scout about the water before I go putting baits out. And yes, I use Google Maps and I have a rough idea of the terrain that I'm heading to, but nothing beats a real life picture. And yeah, I don't want to dwell on that part too much, but you know, everything comes at a price. Like I said, it's a compromise. With a drone with a camera, a drone without a camera. For myself as a content creator, I like to have the camera. Adds a different perspective and a bit more, just makes the videos better. Okay. Another topic of discussion is the setup costs. You know, you're investing, you know, about $1,000 into a drone, and for a lot of people that's a bit out of reach. So you know, if you want to get into it, then you need to look at the cheaper end of the market, you know, like your older Phantom 3s. If you're a beginner, you can obviously get away with using what you've got in reality. A lot of my fish I've only caught 200 to 250 meters off the beach, so you don't need anything too crazy to get out there and just experience the whole thing. But if you want to take your drone fishing to the next level, obviously you want to go further out, so you're going to need to look at a bigger reel, has a bigger spool capacity, bigger rod perhaps, and the braid, I guess, is also another expense. You know, you're going to put a kilometre of braid on there, it's going to set you back a couple $100. It's not exactly cheap. It's not expensive either, but if you out there and you're hooking up to jet skis and boats or whatever, and you're losing a lot of braid, you know, every time you go out, it's going to add up really quick. I think I prefer, when it comes to reels, I think I prefer your standard spinning egg beater style reel, just for the easy use. Overheads are great, don't get me wrong. What frustrates me about using an overhead is having to manually guide the line back onto the spool every time. And when you're fighting a big fish and you're caught up in the moment, it's quite easy to forget about that. And next minute, you've got all your line bunched up on one spot of the spool, and creates another set of headaches. So if you're a beginner and you're just getting started, definitely start with what you've got. You want to have at least 300 meters of capacity on your reel. And I think it's absolutely crazy that people go and bomb out baits and they leave 50 meters or less on their spool. One decent shark, sambo, anything solid, big stingray comes and grabs that, it's all over, mate. You're going to get dusted. So in my opinion, I would always leave at least a third of your spool capacity on your reel. So if it's 300 meters of spool capacity, you want to leave at least 100 on there. When it comes to picking a spot, definitely pays to jump on Google Map, change the view to satellite view, and just scout about. I've put a couple of posts up on social media over the last couple of weeks on what I look for, and sometimes I get fish, sometimes I don't. It's just the nature of the game. It's one thing to sit there and ask people, oh, where do I go, and blah 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 blah, but you don't learn anything in doing that. You don't become a better fisherman or anything like that if you're just copying what other people are doing. Well, not copying what other people are doing, but not actually working it out for yourself. Yeah, we all need a bit of help here and there, and there's nothing wrong with that, but at the end of the day, what you learn by going out there and doing yourself is what's going to pay off in the long run. So I look, most of the reels I use, I have at least 500 meters of braid, so I'll pick a spot, okay, and you can use the distance measurement in Google Maps, and I'll just ping a spot on the beach and I'll drag a line out to where it goes from light color to dark color, and I'll just see how far it is. If it's further than 500 meters, I forget about it, mate. I don't even go there. Just keep on looking until you find something that's a bit closer. Probably when you're starting off, you probably don't want to go further than 250 meters, just because it gets a little bit intimidating. A lot of people get scared going further than that, and if something happens, you know, it's further, like a lot of, so let's say if you're using an electrical release system and it doesn't release, there's been a few people that have had that issue and they've had to fly their drone back. So if you're 500 meters out and you need to fly your drone back, you're increasing your risk of complications and things going wrong absolutely big time. So wouldn't be a smart move to go and do that sort of distance or fly those sort of conditions if you're a beginner. Definitely want to learn the basics and get your head around how everything works, and get some experience with smaller, closer drops, and once you're a bit more comfortable, step it up a bit. What else is there to talk about? So I think, to recap, I've covered the safety. Safety is absolutely paramount. Covered the drones, what's the best drone to use. I mean, it really comes down to budget at the end of the day. Gear I've covered in other videos, but like I said, there's a compromise between a long rod and a short rod. Reels, you know, spool capacity is going to limit how far you can go. I read a comment about somebody flying their drone out, and the line, basically someone flew their drone out and spooled themselves. The line popped off their reel, got caught in the props of the drone, and down she went. So it certainly pays to be familiar with your gear and know exactly, you know, what you're working with to avoid something like that happening. Such a very simple mistake can be quite a costly one. At least the person that this occurred to only had a cheaper drone. I think it was a Phantom 3, so it's not a massive loss, but it's still a loss at the end of the day. And I'm all about eliminating losses as much as possible. So, and then I guess the fear is a natural thing, and it really does pay to get that practice and get some experience under your belt, just flying a drone in an open space before you go to the beach. And even before you go to the beach, simulate simulate your weight. So when I first started, I knew I was going to be fishing with a 6 to 8 ounce sinker, so I'd attach a 6 to 8 ounce sinker, and I figured the biggest bait I'm going to drop out is a full herring or half a mullet. So I weighed one of them, and then I got the same sinker to represent that weight and attached it to the drone, and I just flew around at a local park practicing my releases, practicing different heights, different speeds, all sorts of different scenarios. And even after I did all that practice and I got to the beach for the first time, boof, everything that I had just been practicing just left me, and I'm sitting on the beach absolutely myself, concerned that I'm going to lose my drone. And we all face that, especially for the first, and I still get nervous these days is when I connect up a drone and send it out. There's always that fear that things are going to go wrong, but I guess, you know, as time goes on and you get more experience, you overcome your fear. And yeah, so I think it's important that, you know, as a community we all help each other, but at the same time you need to like put your fears aside and get out there and do things yourself, you know. If you're spending a couple months and you haven't got any fish, then maybe try somewhere else. Maybe try different baits, maybe try, I don't know, different things. But you know, it's one thing to ask someone where to go, and it's like I said before, 2 years it took me to get my first snapper, and then I got 4 in 2 weeks. Like and a couple since then on drone. So yeah, get out there, have fun, be safe, and look out for each other. And any questions, chuck them down below. I'll be sure to answer them. The community at Land to Air Fishing on Face group, it's just punched over 600 members, so we've got a really buzzing community over there. Welcome you to join, ask your questions. If you found any value to this video, be sure to like, share and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Support the guy that's supporting you guys, I guess. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, hope this video has given you guys a little bit of information, and sort of, at least from my perspective, address the elephant in the room. Especially with this corona thing, and everyone's been in lockdown, and everyone's been looking at, you know, us fishermen looking at what's next and evolving the sport. It was only a matter of time before drone fishing got to where it's got, and it's here to stay, it's not going away. So we all need to play our part and make sure that we're responsible and doing everything that we can to play our part, really. Alright guys, catch you next time.